The Volkswagen Beetle, cute, simple, and beloved worldwide, has a past far darker than it seems. Born in Nazi Germany and nearly scrapped before production, the Beetle went on to become a global icon. Its origin is tied to one of the darkest chapters in human history. In the 1930s, Adolf Hitler personally ordered the creation of a people's car in German Volkswagen. He envisioned a cheap, simple, and reliable car that every German family could afford, and he enlisted the legendary engineer Ferdinand Porsche to design it. The car was meant to symbolize Nazi Germany's technological power and prosperity, and was officially named the KDF wagon, short for Strength Through Joy, after a Nazi propaganda program. Production began in a factory built specifically for the Beetle in 1938, funded in part by German citizens who prepaid for the car through a Nazi savings scheme. But most of those buyers never received their vehicles, as World War II erupted shortly after, and the factory was repurposed for military production. The car Hitler hoped would drive the Third Reich's image instead disappeared into obscurity, until it was later resurrected and transformed into a global icon of peace, love, and rebellion, far removed from its original fascist roots. Just as the Volkswagen Beetle was about to enter mass production in 1938, World War II erupted and everything changed. The Nazi regime halted all civilian car manufacturing and converted the massive Wolfsburg factory, built specifically for the Beetle, into a wartime vehicle plant. Instead of cars for the people, it began producing military machines like the Kubelwagen and Schwimmwagen. Although over 300,000 German citizens had prepaid for a Beetle through a Nazi savings program, not a single one received their car. Their money vanished, and only a few dozen prototype Beetles were made before the war consumed all production efforts. The factory was later bombed and left in ruins. For a while, it seemed the Beetle would be lost to history, a failed Nazi propaganda project buried in the ashes of war. But against all odds, the car that was almost stillborn would rise again and become a symbol of peace, freedom, and endurance in the decades to come. In the aftermath of World War II, the Volkswagen factory in Wolfsburg lay in ruins, bombed, looted, and filled with unexploded ordnance. Most believed it was beyond saving, but in 1945 a British Army officer named Major Ivan Hurst was assigned to inspect the site, and what he did next changed automotive history. Recognizing the potential of the strange little car designed by Ferdinand Porsche, Hurst took it upon himself to clear the factory, repair the equipment, and restart production of the Beetle. When British officials tried to give the entire Volkswagen operation to Ford Motor Company for free, Henry Ford's executives laughed at the idea, calling the car worthless. General Motors, Fiat, and others rejected it too. No one believed the Beetle had a future except Hurst, who ordered 20,000 Beetles to be built for the British Army, saving the company from collapse. Without this single decision by one British officer, the Beetle would have died in the rubble of Nazi Germany. But instead, it rose from the ashes to become a global icon of peace, freedom, and engineering simplicity. During World War II, the Volkswagen factory also became a site of immense suffering. Over 15,000 forced laborers, many of them prisoners of war and civilians from occupied countries, were made to work under inhumane conditions to build vehicles, including early versions of the Beetle. These workers endured long hours, starvation diets, and physical abuse, with many not surviving the ordeal. The factory even had its own sub-camp linked to the brutal Nazi concentration camp system. For decades, this grim part of the Beetle's history remained largely hidden from public knowledge. And it wasn't until the 1990s that Volkswagen officially acknowledged its involvement and established a fund to compensate surviving laborers. This painful legacy stands in stark contrast to the Beetle ES later image, as a cheerful symbol of peace and freedom, reminding us that even the most beloved machines can carry a complicated and troubling past. Volkswagen never officially named the car Beetle when it was first created. The nickname Beetle emerged informally after the war, inspired by the car's round, bug-like shape. Over time, the name spread globally and became so popular that even Volkswagen eventually embraced it. Surprisingly, the company resisted the name for years, preferring more technical labels while the public pushed the nickname into pop culture. In Brazil, it was called Fusca, in France, Coxel, and in Mexico, Vo. The Beetle became a cultural icon under a name it was never officially given, proof that public perception can overpower corporate branding, and the name that was never planned ended up defining one of the most famous cars in history. One of the most bizarre and fascinating traits of the early Volkswagen Beetle was its ability to briefly float on water. Although it was never designed to be amphibious, its tightly sealed body panels, curved underbelly, and lightweight structure created an almost watertight shell. In several real-world cases during the 1940s and 50s, owners discovered that their Beetles could survive short crossings over flooded roads or rivers, essentially bobbing like a cork. The roots of this feature go back to the war years when the Beetle AS platform was used for military vehicles like the Schwimmwagen, a fully amphibious car built for the German army, and that same attention to sealing and weight distribution carried over to the civilian Beetle by accident. In one notable test, a Beetle remained afloat long enough for the driver to escape safely after driving into deep water. While far from boat-worthy, this unexpected buoyancy became part of the Beetle's legendary toughness and earned it a reputation for surviving just about anything. Unlike most cars of its time, the Volkswagen Beetle didn't need a radiator or coolant system. Its engine was air-cooled, meaning it used simple airflow and cooling fins to regulate temperature. No water, no hoses, no risk of freezing or boiling over. This made the Beetle incredibly reliable in extreme conditions, able to run in scorching deserts or freezing mountains with little risk of overheating or coolant failure. The design was so simple and durable that Beetles often kept running even after taking serious mechanical abuse. In fact, some Beetles operated for decades in remote areas without ever seeing a mechanic. The air-cooled engine located in the rear also gave better traction on slippery roads. While the design eventually became outdated, it helped make the Beetle one of the most dependable and rugged cars ever built, able to go places where many modern cars simply wouldn't survive. Most people know the Volkswagen Beetle as a compact, curvy car, but few realize it was once transformed into a convertible pickup truck. In the 1950s and 60s, Volkswagen and third-party coach builders experimented with utility versions of the Beetle. These rare models were mostly used in Europe and South America, particularly by small businesses and farmers. Some were factory-built, while others were custom-made in limited numbers, making them extremely rare today. Volkswagen never widely promoted these variants, and many were scrapped or lost to time, so spotting one today is like finding a unicorn. By 1972, the Volkswagen Beetle did the unthinkable. It overtook the Ford Model T to become the best-selling car in history with over 15 million units produced. This was no small feat. The Model T had held the record for nearly 50 years and symbolized American industrial power. Yet, during an era when the US was obsessed with muscle cars and big engines, a tiny German import quietly took over the streets. Its reliability, simplicity, and charm won over millions, and at one point, Volkswagen was selling over 500,000 Beetles a year in the US alone. For a foreign car to dominate in the land of V8s was more than surprising. It was a cultural revolution on four wheels. One of the most unbelievable facts about the classic Volkswagen Beetle is how easy it was to work on, especially the engine. Skilled Volkswagen mechanics could remove the entire engine in just 15 minutes using only basic tools. Even hobbyists and backyard mechanics found it simple to service, making it a dream for DIY repairs and upgrades. There were no radiators, no complex electronics, and barely any wiring to deal with. The Beetle even became a favorite in car repair schools because of how accessible and modular its components were. And today, it is still celebrated as one of the easiest engines to remove and replace in automotive history. Long before Tesla popularized the term frunk, the Volkswagen Beetle was already rocking one. Because its engine was mounted in the rear, the Beetle featured a spacious front trunk under the hood, a clever use of space that held the spare tire, toolkit, and luggage. While it looked unusual to some, this setup wasn't just quirky, it was smart engineering. The front storage helped balance the car's weight distribution, improving handling and road grip. Decades later, modern EVs would revive the idea, but the humble Beetle had already done it quietly and brilliantly. On July 30, 2003, the final classic Volkswagen Beetle rolled off the assembly line in Puebla, Mexico. And it wasn't just the end of a production run, it was a deeply emotional moment. The last unit was a powder blue Ultima Edison, lovingly crafted and immediately sent to Volkswagen's museum in Germany. After 65 years of global production and over 21 million units built, the Beetle wasn't just a car, it was a cultural icon.